sit on the porch at evenings slapping mosquitoes, while elders scared children with their zombie stories. The art form is thought to have come from Africa, following in the griot tradition. This is evident in the Anansi stories of the tricky spider that originated in West Africa but is found in various forms in the tales of some of the Caribbean islands. Yet, storytelling in its traditional sense no longer takes place. There are many distractions, including smart devices. The Department of Creative Economy is therefore capturing the stories of nationals like Agnes Skerritt, who hold the historical record. At the age of 94, Mrs. Skerritt shared some of her life experiences with wit and candor. She is helping us to safeguard the storytelling element in the domain of oral traditions and expressions, including language as a vehicle of the intangible cultural heritage. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the candor, wit, and humor of Mistress Agnes Skerritt.
I was born in St. Peter's, you know. That's where I was born. And then my parents had us very fast. May 29, my sister 30, and the other sister 31. And then my Mrs. Ribeiro, there was a lady who had a big business in Sandy Point, the Ribeiros, and she opened a place in Sandy Point for my father, a grocery, and in what in those days they used to call a rubber shop, a liquor store. And then, so we were living inside, that's how we came to be living in Sandy Point. But I grew up more with the Ribeiro than, you know, between the two houses. But after a while, I think my father, after a few years, he moved back to St. Peter's. I was born right opposite the playing field. Mr. Bass has a shop now. That's where I was born. And then he moved back to St. Peter's, but I stayed with the Ribeiros in Sandy Point until I was about 9 years old, and then came up to Bass there to stay with to go to the convent school. Sandy, really, yeah, it was almost a Ribeiro community because it was Mrs. Ribeiro, and then she had a son called Gerard Ribeiro, who then lived here at Baker's Corner. His son is that fellow Joseph, and another one who migrated to Canada called Alwyn. Alwyn was the choir master in our church. His brother was the organist, and of course at 9 years old I was in the choir. But it was a different setting, darling. Everybody was family. Everybody knew each other, and they never called Mrs. Ribeiro anything but by her husband's name. Her husband was Joseph, Miss Joe. Everybody called him. And in those days, they had a bakery, and you would go and buy a bread for a penny, and they'd come into the shop, buy the bread for the penny, and then, Miss Joe, oh, me can put in some butter for me. The butter costs more than the bread, you know. Or, Miss Joe, you come with a little piece of cheese for me. And she'd put it in. But another thing I recall from my own experiences, after I got married and had children, I lived in 4th Street where we had the drugstore. And one day I was in there and a lady brought my daughter from school, coming from school. Mrs. Skerritt, I just saw your daughter in the square with some other young ladies, and they were teasing a young man passing through the square who had a nickname. And she said, I know you didn't want your daughter in that kind of company, so I brought her to you. Darling, I thanked her. But today they'll ask you, what you in my child business for? It's a different setup we have here now to what we used to have. It was like the old African adage, it takes a village to build a child. The whole village was involved. My husband came home to me. We lived on the Bay Road in that house, the C. Haley house that juts out in the street a bit by Peter Crew's place. You know, I think it's painted red now, if I'm not mistaken. Gwenny C. Haley was there last. So he came home for lunch one day, and he said to me, Agnes, I hear the palace is for sale. Where Skerritt's drugstore is now, was a wooden building where people lived upstairs, and there was an ice cream parlor downstairs called the Palace. We used to go there as children from school, to show you how long that is. I said to him, Eric, let's buy it now. He said, with what? I said, let me tell you something. Bank didn't lend money. You were paying Mr. Sealy $75 a month for this wreck here. They don't even fix what you tell them is broken before you move in. And every time a hurricane is coming, you're the one who has to go and buy the hammer and the nails and the whatnot to fix up his house. And on top of that, they rented the downstairs to a man came, Mr. Oh God. You remember that crazy fellow used to go around town saying he was a Blake? He used to wear a short white pants man. Copper. His father had a place where he went around buying furniture from people all over the village. So he had a used furniture place down there. Darling, in those days we had linoleum carpets in the bedroom, not carpets. I went to change the linoleum one Christmas or something, and there was a little crack in between two of the boards. When I took up the linoleum, it was full of bed bugs. I don't remember seeing a bed bug in my life, besides one on Sunday in church I saw one going up a man's white jacket. Anyway, I knew what they were, and my husband freaked out. So we had to flit all the beds, flit. Then the final solution was to lock up the house and burn a sulfur candle in the house. So we had to lock up the house, put out the candle, and we took the children up. There was the airport then, you know, on the runway, so they could run around and whatnot. It was just a grass runway in those days. When the Palace came up for sale, and I said to him, let's buy it, he went to Mr. Claxton, who was selling it. What was his first name? Earl Claxton's father, and the child, Gillian, who was around entertaining people. You know Gillian Morris, her grandfather. He was a real estate man in College Street. And the Haley started to bid for the same house. Fortunately, my husband had informed me when I said, let's buy it. Okay, I think I'll go and ask Mr. Boone what he thinks. And Mr. Boone was just his batch. Mr. Boone said, your wife talking sense to you. You don't want to be paying rent for your whole life. You want to own your own place. As she told you, a roof over her children's head. So he said, he's the one who got lent us the money, Mr. Boone. He was our godfather, I would say. And then it was a wooden building which had been an ice cream parlor with family living upstairs. So all we did was bring down from the upstairs floor to the ground floor and just put it to frontage, which that was the only concrete part of the building. You understand what I'm explaining to you, ain't it? And one night when we were having dinner, the front door knocked like you knew it was a problem and trouble. His brother was there telling him the house was on fire. Somebody set the house on fire. After we had already fixed it up and we were ready to, I had started moving in, sending up every day with him a box of curtains, a box of sheets. I am going to tell you something. Close the 2 years. When I got in front of the building and I saw the roof falling, because that's the most important thing, we had to build a new roof. And when that new roof fell in, I felt as if I was having a child. You know who was a big help to everybody in those days? You ever heard of a man called Moonlight?
Yes.
Oh, Moonlight was ready to be help to anybody. And he worked like a Trojan, because all the fire department could do was we were so near to the next house where Mr. Samuel used to live, and the one above us where the Eads had. So they were concentrating on those two houses, not as much on our house. So the whole house went. And my husband took to his bed for 3 days. Couldn't move from the shock because we didn't know where we were going to turn next year. A year or two passed and he would walk up Church Street and he was then working where Digicel is now on the corner with a brother called the People's Drugstore, I think it was called. Just not to walk up 4th Street. And Mr. Boone called him one day and he said, Eric, what are you doing with that property you have on 4th Street? He said, Mr. Boone, to tell you the truth, I don't have it. I don't have it in me. He said, don't talk like a damn fool. That was Mr. Boone, very blunt. He said, you listen to what your wife told you? She wants a property that is hers over her children's head. Come. And we lent you the money from Capice Estates or something like that. Mr. Boone was the one who sent to Trinidad and got the plans for that building. It is claimed to be the strongest building in St. Kitts because the papers came down like that from Trinidad from a company called Menson Moore. When Esmond Ross was building it, he twice or 3 times he said, Eric, I'm going to use a bad word, but it's in the dictionary, you know. Eric, what the f*** you really did? You must have been in a jail. Eric said, why you say so, Esmond? He said, well, I never see someone stealing a building yet. Those 4-inch steel could be 6 or 8 inches and you save half the money. My husband said to him, boy, the white man said, do it so, see? The same thing came up to when they had to mix the cement. Mr. Boone ordered, it's the only building I think in St. Kitts made of waterproof cement. Ordered the cement for us, waterproof cement. Esmond again. What are you building there? I'm going to say, gee, I never see someone's cement concentration. The white man said, do it so. And he and Esmond were always at loggerheads because husband wanted to cut corners and he wouldn't let him. Well, at that time, as I told you, I was a photographer. So I was the one doing portraits of children and passports and things, weddings and things like that. On the Bay Road in that C. Haley house. And then I continued it when we got up there. Never thought of being a pharmacist. But in those days, you could become a pharmacist. You work under a certified pharmacist. You become a student pharmacist. So I didn't go anywhere to study pharmacology. I studied under my husband. But let me tell you something. I would never advise a woman to learn anything from her husband. For he was a stern taskmaster. He can give me a little, measure this, a little 2 gram, measure this. And you have to get 2 grams. If you put over 2 drops more than 2 grams, don't think you're going to throw it back in the bottle, you know, which I went to do one day. And he nearly brought me to thy kingdom come. No, you throw it out in the drain and he was a good task. He was a good teacher, though, and I'm grateful for him. My best friend in St. Kitts, if you ask me, any of my children tell you, is Helen Lewis, his grandmother. She was the most faithful friend, and I refer to her as my sister, that anybody could ever want. And she was a strict disciplinarian to the other staff. Put a step out of line, Helen was right there, corrected. And you know, she would, in those days, people used to love to buy, you ever heard the word zot? A zot of something you want a small amount. So she would sit in the back in the office and wrap out the little $1 package of Epsom salts, and it had to be the dose, because when the person bought that, they were going to throw it in the water, knowing it's a dose. It had to be an ounce. Mrs. Lewis would sit in that back room wrapping out those Epsom salts, and then she would tell us sulfatized oil powder and anything like that. Oh, she wasn't my friend. She was my sister. We have been together since we know each other from 10 years of age. That's a long time, eh?
We'll be right back with more from Mistress Agnes Skerritt.
If you're HIV positive or have an STI, having unprotected sex with multiple partners puts them in grave danger. You'll expose every partner and their present and future partners to HIV or another STI. Use a condom every time you have sex. You can live a productive life even if diagnosed with HIV. Remember, early detection is key to your survival. Be responsible, protect yourself and others. Help stop the spread of HIV and other STIs.
It's time that we realize that we must work together to thrive. The world as we know it, the sky and below it. Could I never have more wonder? Yeah, with life and all you see and the climate's changing. But hope is remaining. And we can't ignore the future. It depends on you and me. One chance, all that we got. One voice, together we strive. Take care, the world where we live. Permite a todos vivir. Tomamos la oportunidad para cortar la humanidad. And I must leave no one behind because we are one climate, one Caribbean. One climate, one Caribbean.
Health-Wise on ZIZ TV, Mondays at 8:30 p.m. Hosted by Dr. Malik Lescott, Dr. Jolette Woodley, and Dr. Patrice Lawrence.
Living Heritage continues as Mistress Agnes Skerritt recalls her experiences helping others.
You know, I was the first person to notice that they were handicapped children and kids. There's a home, there was a house opposite the children's home. And I was very involved in the children's home with nurse. You know, the metro that was there for years and years and years. And then this house across the street, I think is abandoned now, if I'm not mistaken. I rented that place and started filling it up with handicapped children. And that was the first home of handicapped children. And I remember how kind we can be to each other. One was a blind child, had been taken to the hospital by her mother, and the mother never went back for the child, no matter how much they called her. So then they called me and asked me if I would take the child in. And I had an American woman working there with me at one time, and she would take her up, her name was Nicola, would take the child with her up the village when she went shopping. I think she was doing it to be seen to be doing something. You know, that's how they are when they come to our country. But people in the village used to ask her why Miss Skerritt don't keep them children down there, hide, why she's sending them out in the street for. And as I was telling you, when I started the Society for the Prevention of Child Abuse, because I had the drugstore and the young people coming in to me with their stories about a father molesting a daughter or a pastor molesting them in the church, things like that. But I knew what I was getting. And funnily enough, there was a book printed here. Did I still print The Traveller? No. We used to have a book for tourists called The Traveller. This woman was staying at Jakarta, and she sent her husband down to the beauty store they used to have, the beauty parlor they had there at the time, to buy a magazine for her to take on the boat, on the plane. He saw Cosmopolitan, Mademoiselle, this and what books he knew she had at home. He bought The Traveller. Do you know that once stopped at the drugstore and came in, I was sitting on a stool in the prescription department. She knelt down here, put her arms around me, and thanked me for writing that book because she had been molested by her grandfather. They were saying that those things don't happen in St. Kitts, but I knew what I was getting, darling. I knew the stories. I don't want to say, if I give you situations, you might know the person. I cannot do that. But I know what people coming in and telling me about fathers molesting them and that sort of thing, and I can't be too explicit because it's a small community.
Okay, so
Women, I think, they wanted to be good mothers, but they depended too much on the support of a man, especially if they were not married to the man and they weren't sure how long he'll be around to support them. I've had it out with quite a few of them, don't worry. So you're here till Friday? Basil Henderson used to live in a little house behind what is part of government headquarters now. It was an old prefabricated building as a hotel called the Newstead Hotel at the corner of Central Street and Church Street. That was just a fabricated building that came here from Guyana or somewhere like that. And Basil lived in a little house at the back. But I think Robert Bradshaw always saw leadership material in Basil, but he had not had the training. You know what I mean? Then he used me as a sound box. And he'd come down and we'd sit on the step outside of my dark room on the Bay Road. And he'd say, I want to start a 4-H organization. Sure, okay, what to do? I want to start Carnival. Okay, 57, we started Carnival here. When they're talking about sugar baths, 70-something. Sugar baths only came out of politics, sir. You know that, don't you? We had 2 carnivals that year. One in Bathia High School grounds and one in the park. And all of that was pure political. Billy Herbert came here, he wanted to help, he wanted to join the Labour Party. But his father, of course, wouldn't hear of it because he was happy puppy. He was what I call an Oreo cookie. You know Oreo cookie? So Basil would come down to me and he'd say, I want to start Carnival. I think we should have a Carnival. But he knew who to, he found his workers too, He found me and he found Mrs. Bissipal, who was the sister of the lady who owned Losadas. Yes. Mr. Alfonso, who was then Commissioner of Police here. And that year Alfonso sent up to Trinidad for a troupe of costumes from the earlier carnival in February of Red Indians. Those years we had beautiful costumes. Cromwell Borry was another one who used to put in a nice troupe. One year he put in a group of Sing Sing prisoners, and another year he put in the 10 Commandments. And you know who? You would have heard her name because she must have, maybe she died before you got to know her, Janice Reynolds. Yes. Janice used to put in some beautiful troops. Some of my children were in one of her troops called the Spanish Dancers. There was another lady here, but she passed away long ago, Iris Howell. She has a son who got married to Jennifer Evelyn. Ron?
yes, yes.
Is it Ron? She had 2 sons, Ron and Jean here. Look at how you carry me back in history, woman. If you asked me to tell a story, I couldn't make up one. But if I experience something, I can talk about it, especially if it means a lot to me. If it's dear to my heart. Like if you ask me about my home with the handicapped children, I could talk for hours. Ask me about my work with Noyce Lloyd at the children's home, I could talk for another set of hours. Ask me about my work against child abuse, I could run off at the mouth. One of my prayers years ago, about 50 years ago, in my house at Shadwell, I said, Lord, do not let me be a bump on a log. Please use me. Use me to feed your hungry and clothe you naked. And that's one prayer I know he has answered, plus others, mind you. But that was one that was very dear to my heart because I saw too much pain in daughters that were molested by their father or a stepfather. There was one case of a woman, and again I have to be careful how I tell you the story. We found out she was pregnant, the daughter was pregnant, just going in to do her O-levels, pregnant by her father. And they were living in a village in the country. We went and we found the wife. You know who she put out of the house? Would you like to guess who she put out of the house? You have to be involved in the community. You have to be interested in uplifting your community. If you see a child, as I told you with one of my daughters, a woman sitting in the square with another group of children teasing a man, and the lady brought her to the drugstore because she knew I did not want my child in that sort of confusion. So I am not that kind of person. You may not believe me, you don't have to believe me, but I never know what color I am facing if it's different to mine. It does not bother me. Never did. You see, I grew up in a family where in Sandy Point, we were like, you'd almost say, the head of the whole of Sandy Point. Everybody believed in the Ribeiro family and they always helped people. In the 1948 strike, for instance, old Mrs. Ribeiro, who had then closed her business and just had a little place down by the Sea Breeze. You know where Sea Breeze is, by the Methodist Cemetery, down the street?
Yes.
Yeah. That was the Catholic church at first, you know. Yeah. And then we built the one on Main Street, and my family bought that house. That's where I got married, actually. The wedding reception was, I got married in the church in Sandy Point, and the wedding reception was held up, because those are my memories. You have to be involved, and involved in a meaningful way, not a critical way, not criticizing, because you only put somebody back up. You say, wait, they talking to Miss Skerritt from all them two old time stories. Who want to hear that? No. You say, but Miss Blake, you're doing a wonderful job. They say we hear those old time stories. It's a difference, you know. There's a difference to criticizing, critical, or appreciative, you know. And I don't think enough of us. We have, to put it simply, we have become a me generation. No longer will your child be walking around the street with somebody you don't want to see that child with, and somebody will dare to come and tell you, Mrs. Blake, your daughter, I brought your daughter up. What are you minding me child business for? We don't appreciate it and thank the people anymore. You get upset right away. You're minding her child problem, you're minding her child business, and you're not actually criticizing the mother when you do that, but you're paying her compliment because you know if you talk to her, she'll be glad to hear it. And that is what we want more in the society. You all better pull it out, pull it out like a brain, and do it, because nobody else is around who remembers half of what I remember of the old time. Maybe it's because they were not involved. But I always wanted to be involved with what was happening in my island. But I've had an interesting life. I've had a good life. I've been blessed abundantly by the good Lord.
We hope you enjoyed the life experience stories of Mistress Agnes Skerritt as much as we did. And yes, we want to pull out and preserve those tales for the next generation. Join us again next time, because together we can safeguard our heritage.